You've tried to check all the boxes. You have a CTA in every episode. That's a call to action. But nothing's happening. No one's doing the call to action. So, what's wrong? The worst part is when the call to action isn't creating action, you can't even tell if there are other fail points further down the line in your podcast funnel, whether they like or hate your email sequence, or whether they even like your lead magnet. Since the CTA is the first step, if it doesn't entice them into action, nothing else behind it works. So, today, we are focusing on the moment inside your episode when you ask your listener to do something. Welcome to Podcasting for Financial Professionals. I'm Virginia Elder, founder of Podcast Abundance, where we help you use podcasting to market your business, to increase your authority, to get more eyes on your practice, and to capture leads for your business. If you're an investment advisor, tax strategist, business finance sleuth, or wealth management professional who wants your podcast to actually support growth, not just create content, you're in the right place. I made the podcast conversion blueprint just for you. It walks you through exactly how to turn your listeners into clients using a simple framework you can apply right away. The link is in the show notes. Here we go into today's episode. If your listener has spent 20, 30, or 40 minutes with you, they have already given you something valuable, their attention. They let you into their earbuds, their car, their walk, their workout, their workday. And then at the very end of that experience, too many hosts say something vague like, visit my website, book a call with me, or check the show notes. That's not strategy. That is a super low effort request that's the equivalent to checking into a hotel and being told, your room's upstairs. Cool. Which floor? What's the room number? East wing, west wing? Where am I going? It's a complete shrug of responsibility. And I know that sounds tough, but hang with me. If your call to action feels like an afterthought or a random phrase just thrown in there at the end because you're supposed to say it because everybody says it, well, your listener is going to treat it like an afterthought as well by completely disregarding it. So here's the first mindset shift. Your CTA, call to action, is not a commercial. Your call to action is not the awkward part that you have to just squeeze in and just like shove in there real quickly before the episode ends. Nor is it an off-the-cuff announcement. It is not where you list everything you offer, every link you have, every possible opportunity someone could do business with you or interact with you. Your call to action is very strategically chosen, the next logical step for your listener toward a relationship with you. When your call to action works, it feels like a natural continuation of the episode, like the no-brainer next step of where your listener should go next. They should think like, yeah, that is exactly what I need. Awesome. Boom, they go get it. And for financial professionals, this matters even more because your listener is likely not making an impulsive decision. The folks who act on your call to action are not those who heard one episode from you and just jump in. Since your services touch a closely held part of their lives, retirement, tax planning, business finance, personal finance, investment strategy, divorce, they are moving cautiously and slowly and using deep discernment to decide whether you're the right provider for them. Every episode or blog or social media post is their chance to further evaluate how much they trust you. When you demonstrate that you understand their problem and your approach feels aligned with what they're looking for, then they will decide to take the step to stay in your world. Your call to action should support that process and that discernment, not push or rush it. So, why does your CTA get ignored? Most of the time, it's not because your people listening or watching are uninterested. It's because the ask is unclear, mismatched, or too big for where the listener is today in their relationship with you. A listener who just found you for the first time is not ready to book a call. A listener who is still trying to even understand what their problem is and whether they need outside help may not be ready to learn about your pricing or hear a pitch or enroll in a course. That's why book a call is my absolute least favorite CTA, and I steer all my clients away from it. Listeners are terrified, and I'm not kidding, scared to death that they're going to get trapped in some kind of high pressure sales call. And that feels really, really scary. People do not want to book a call. Okay. Now, occasionally, book a call can be the right call to action if the episode is a decision stage episode and the listener is clearly being guided toward working with you. Then yes, booking a call can make sense. The folks you are trying to capture in that moment are mature podcast listeners. They have advanced through those like beginner and even nurture stage episodes with you. And they are to the point where we're talking about like actual decision making. Those people might be ready. But in most of your episodes, especially the educational or discovery focused episodes, they need a smaller step. Think about it. It costs you almost nothing to create a checklist or a guide. It allows you to collect their email while also giving them that soft next step. The point here is that your call to action should meet them where they are right now, at their current stage of life or as they face their current financial decision, which could be just learning and consuming resources and making a tweak to their budget. Not necessarily where you wish they were, which is ready to talk to you and sign up for financial planning or nail down their estate plan or whatever your services are. Now, if I could fix most podcast calls to action with one change, it would be this. Stop asking your listeners and viewers to take a generic action and instead start giving them a compelling reason to take a specific next step. That's the difference. A weak call to action says, visit my website for more information. A stronger CTA says, if this episode helped you see that some of your estate may not go to who you thought, download my estate planning checklist for couples with teenage kids. It will simplify some of the big estate planning decisions for you as parents and make getting legal documents drafted much easier for both of us. You can find it at estateplanforfamilieswithteens.com. Totally made that up, okay? That is not a real website. But do you hear the difference between just go to the website and then this clear description of why I need it, what I need, and where to go? And it's a easy, like estateplanforfamilieswithteens.com. Okay, like pretty clear. Like I could remember that. One of those calls to action is a really low effort and kind of like, here's my business card. And the other reaffirms the listener's situation, provides a baby step solution, and a reason why they would want to take action. That's what your listener needs. They need context. They need relevance. They need a reason to care right now. So here's the simple call to action structure that I recommend. First, name the problem or realization that the episode just created or highlighted for your listener. Second, connect that problem to the next step. Third, explain what the listener will get. And fourth, tell them exactly where to go. That's it. 4 steps. Here's what that sounds like for my show. If today's episode helped you see that your podcast episodes are probably not pointing listeners towards a soft next step, download the Podcast Conversion Blueprint. It will help you connect your episodes, calls to action, and listener journey so that your podcast supports your business instead of simply adding more content to the internet. You can grab it at podcastabundance.com/resources. Okay, so that's a real call to action and a real resource of mine. But that call to action works because it's related to this episode. It's not a random resource relating to like drafting your own show notes. It's not asking you to book a call with me. I'm not selling you something. It names the pain, offers a tool, explains the benefit, and gives one clear instruction. This is where we get to go through some real calls to action from real shows. I've changed the names of hosts, shows, companies, websites to help protect the offenders. But we're going to walk through the example, the call to action as it is, as I found on the actual show live, why it's not converting as well as it could, and what I'd change to make that next step more specific, compelling, and aligned with their episode. Example 1. The Money Show is your podcast, and this show would not be a show without you. Leave us your honest ratings and reviews in Apple Podcasts because we appreciate it when you do. Why not share this episode with a friend considering a fancy money move? Oh, you're the one thinking about it? The experienced professionals on Barbara's team at Financial Advisors R Us will look at your whole picture and help you create a safe roadmap free of charge. Click the link to the free assessment in the episode description or call, and they give a phone number, to book yours. Meet online in the comfort of your own home or in person at one of our locations in Dallas, Kansas City, or Baltimore. Okay. So what's wrong with that call to action? It was long, but there was also a lot of information in there. So my first thing is that everybody has to stop asking for ratings and reviews. I know it's been like ingrained. I don't know who started it, but for years podcasters have asked for ratings and reviews. It has absolutely no ROI on your business when you get a review. So save that request for when you email your list of people, like, twice a year, like, hey, if you listen to the podcast, please do a rating or review. Like save it for a separate thing. It should not be your podcast call to action, because the other problem is that, sure, someone does a rating and review, but they aren't signing up for your thing. They aren't giving you your email, and they aren't entering into your business. So scratch that. What I do love about this example is that it's playful and it's like, oh, you're thinking about it? And then it tells us how they're going to create that safe roadmap. Notice the wording there. And then they say it's for free also. I don't like that they didn't share the website URL verbally. It was just like a click here if. That's probably because it's not an easy to remember link. I don't want to go 2 places. I don't want to go to the show notes, hunt this down, then click here, and then, no. I need one step. I need it to be super easy. They do give a phone number. So cool, interesting. Maybe they've figured out that most of their people do prefer to pick up the phone and call. This works for like the older audience. But if I'm listening on my podcast app and I am out for a run, I, for one, I'm on my phone, so I can't dial a phone number because I'm listening to the podcast. And I'm also not going to whip out my phone and dial their phone number while I'm running. So the other piece is they gave us some locations. So, and of course, I had to change those locations, so those aren't real either. But that's helpful because then, as a listener, I would know, okay, well, I'm in Dallas, so we could work with each other in person. So here's my rewrite. If this episode made you wonder whether that fancy money move is actually right for you, start with Barbara's free Safe Money Move assessment. Her team at Financial Advisors R Us will look at your full financial picture and help you understand what may be smart, what may be risky, and what next step makes the most sense before you make a big decision. You can get started at moneyshowassessment.com. That's moneyshowassessment.com. You can meet online from home or in person at one of their offices in Dallas, Kansas City, or Baltimore. So we kept the locations, we put it in easy to remember URL, and we removed the request for likes and reviews and went straight into, you're basically getting this free money move assessment. I kept in like the fancy money move language and some of that stuff. So now it's compelling, pointed, a bit more concise, and very clear as far as like where to go and how to do this. Okay. Example 2. Ready for support? If you're tired of feeling like you should be further along financially by now and you're ready to get to the root of what's keeping you stuck, I invite you to click here to book a one-on-one financial clarity consultation. This is for women who make good money but still struggle with overspending, debt, saving, or building wealth consistently. Together, we'll look at where you are, where you want to be, what's actually standing in the way, and whether money coaching would help you overcome your biggest financial challenges and reach your goals faster. That's a pretty great call to action. Maybe a little long, but the length really helped me understand what would happen during a consult. And there was language about who it's for so that the listener could self-segment, like, am I in or am I out? There's supportive language that gives the listener the guided feeling like they're not alone. We're going to do this together. And yes, it's a strong ask because it's not a free download. The show is asking a viewer to book a consult, but again, the language makes it really feel welcoming and like a natural next step to the episode. So my only beef is that it was a click here type CTA with no actual website stated. This is only useful for viewers or readers, not listeners. So you're cutting out a significant portion of your audience based on how they consume. And when you don't say your link, no one can remember it because you didn't say it, so it doesn't exist. So my rewrite for this one would only change the easy to say and easy to recall link instead of saying click here. So even if you had someone create a redirect that was like an easy.com, thing that made sense, and that went to your like really complicated URL for Calendly, for example, I would go through that effort just so that I could say a cool URL easily and that people could remember it. So for example, I even got talktovirginia.com and I have that redirected to all the ways that you can book a call with me and for whatever reason, right? Like podcast clarity call, beyond the podcast, like all these things. So I would go through that effort just so that I could say an easy to remember, easy to recall URL in my call to action. Otherwise, example 2, pretty great. All right, example 3, here we go. Thanks for listening to the show today. Check us out at our website, superretirementpodcast.com. And if you want some help from George, submit your questions at the bottom of the page or sign up for a 30-minute retirement coaching session with George. See you next week. All right, so how about this one? It's very general, uncompelling. I'm going to say low effort, like we talked about. Plus, there are 2 requests built in here, which is confusing. Submit questions and book a call. The call to action in general is so basic that it could just be slapped on any episode. That feels streamlined, but the problem is that he's asking listeners to sign up for a 30-minute coaching session, which is a relatively high commitment next step. Plus, if I'm not ready to buy, I really don't want to book a call, because when he makes his offer, I'll feel bad because he spent time with me and I booked a call and I, took up his expertise for this 30 minutes, but I don't want to do more. That's what listeners are thinking. And this is the type of call to action that, sure, one exists. Good job there. But it's going to take 18 plus months for this host to start to feel like they're getting traction, because the only people who are actually going to do this is when they're a very mature listener, right? Like they've been around and heard it over and over and over, and they are finally ready. This is a retirement show, so a better version of a call to action would depend on the episode topic, like we discussed earlier. But so for a retirement show, I'd create a super simple lead magnet, like a retirement readiness checklist, 5 questions to ask before you retire, the retirement income planning starter guide, something like that. Okay, so the rewrite to example 3 is this. If today's episode made you wonder if your retirement plan is really ready for the next stage, start with our free retirement readiness checklist. It walks you through the key questions to consider before you make major retirement decisions, including income, taxes, timing, healthcare, and how your plan may need to adjust once paychecks stop. You can download it at superretirementpodcast.com/checklist. And after you go through it, if you have a question you want George to answer on a future episode, you can submit it on that same page. All right, so this rewrite call to action works better because the listener is not being asked to jump straight in from I listened to an episode to I'm ready for a 30-minute coaching session with this guy. They are being invited into a useful next step that continues the relationship. The original call to action basically says, thanks for listening, go to my website, look around, submit a question, or book a session. Like super low effort, right? Too many vague options, no clear reason to act. Now, these examples and this section is not meant to shame anyone's call to action. The goal here is to help you hear and see the difference between an ask that sounds fine and one that actually moves the listener. Because many CTAs can sound acceptable from like a non-podcast strategist standpoint, right? Until you ask yourself, would I actually take action on this? That's the test. As you heard and saw in example 3, one of the most common call to action mistakes is using the same CTA on every single episode, no matter what it's about. If you record an episode answering a beginner level question, the listener may need a beginner level step. If you record an episode about a high intent decision, the listener may be ready for a consult call or a discovery call. And then if you record a guest interview that introduces a related topic, the best next step for that episode might be a resource that helps your audience apply that conversation to their life and business. If the episode is meant to attract new listeners, your call to action should help them stay connected to you. If the episode is meant to nurture trust, your call to action should deepen your relationship. If the episode is meant to support a buying decision, your call to action can be a little bit more direct. So I just gave you 3 different scenarios, but hear me. This does not mean you need a million calls to action. Do not get crazy with this. It means you should have a small menu of strategic calls to action matching the type of episode you're producing today. So if you go back to my episode about becoming binge-worthy and learn the 3 different types of episodes you've got to have, you'll realize, okay, I need 3 calls to action. Just 3. Just 3. For most financial professionals, that might mean 1 educational lead magnet, 1 webinar or workshop that you can invite folks to every 30 to 60 days, where it's like posted on a consistent website that you can always share. And then 1 call booking, call to action for the right moment. Okay. Not going to use that one that much. Those 3, good to go. That's enough to get started. And in fact, as we map out the strategic approach to podcasting or YouTubing for your business, we would discuss whether it makes sense to produce each category type of episodes per 60 days or per quarter, whatever the time period, so that you can have those longer stretches of time where you have a consistent call to action. But trust me, listeners get what I call CTA fatigue. They've heard the same thing so many times that they don't even hear it anymore. It goes in one ear and out the other. They've shut it out. So when you change your call to action periodically, it catches their attention again. Now, the 5th reason, we've been through a lot here, but the 5th reason calls to action fail is because they are buried at the very end of the episode. And 80% of your listeners don't even make it there. Really, statistically, 80% of viewers and listeners of podcasts do not complete the episode. They arrive at their destination, finish the chore, finish their workout, and cut it off at the point where they feel like, okay, I got the gist of this episode. I'm good. So if the only time you mention your next step is in the final 30 seconds, you're depending on the listener to make it all the way to the end and still be ready to act. That's a pretty risky bet. You do not need to hammer the CTA throughout the episode, but you can seed it earlier. For example, near the beginning of the episode, you might say, as we go through this, I want you to think about your own estate plan because I have a free resource that will help you map this out, and I'll share where to grab it at the end of the episode. This does 2 things. It tells the listener there's something useful coming, and it gives them a reason to keep them listening. Then, when you mention it again at the end, it does not feel like an interruption or commercial or anything awkward. It's expected. And something I do for my clients is I help them craft a pre-recorded, beautifully edited, perfectly branded call to action in their show intro. And we do record an inserted call to action. We call it a commercial and an outro. All of this is pre-recorded and set up to be tacked on to certain episodes so that they don't have to stumble over their words or be awkwardly introducing themselves each time. It kind of just streamlines everything. The intro CTA piece gets inserted within the first 2 to 4 minutes of the episode. Depending on the show structure and whether they're introducing a guest or what they're doing, it's going to be at that beginning. So either way, your listener's hearing your call to action within the first 2 to 4 minutes. Then the commercial piece, which I know it's not a commercial, it's a call to action, but it's easy to think of like an inserted commercial, right? So that gets inserted within the first 20% of the episode. This gives the host and me as the producer confidence that the majority of their listeners are going to hear one or both of those. Then, of course, we've got the call to action and the outro as well. Now, the 6th and final reason CTAs fail is because they can't survive real life. And what that means is that they are not memorable. Think about it. If you are listening or you have YouTube playing while you're working out, commuting, walking, making lunch, whatever you're doing, you're not going to the show notes unless you're like really hunting something down. Most people never look at the show notes. We do show notes for SEO purposes, and so that when someone goes there, they're really helpful. But the majority of people do not check your show notes. So the words you say for your call to action and the website link you share needs to be concise and memorable. So make it easy for you and the listener. One simple URL, something to memorize. Yes, you're going to put it in the show notes, but you as the host need to say the name of the resource and the URL clearly. Plus, if you're creating a video podcast with me, my editors will put your link on the screen. And think about it this way. Remember, a confused listener does not convert. They're never going to join your email list or whatever it is you're asking them to do. So here's the honest question for you. If someone hears your call to action while driving, can they remember what to search for later? If not, simplify it. And here is something I want you to avoid with your call to action. Your call to action should never make the listener feel like they're being punished for listening. That sounds really dramatic, but think about it with me, okay? They came to you for help, insight, clarity, perspective, education, whatever it is. And if the episode ends with a sudden hard pitch that doesn't match anything with like the tone or anything that they just heard, it breaks trust. It creates suspicion. A CTA should not feel like, okay, now I gave you free value and it's time for you to pay me. That nobody likes that. It doesn't work. It should feel like, if this was useful, here's the next thing that will help you. It's a continuation of like offer and giving. That tone really, really matters, especially in financial services where trust is fragile already and people are cautious. You do not need to manufacture urgency. You do not need to inflate pain. You do not need to make every CTA sound like the listener's life will fall apart if they don't click on that dang link today. You need to be clear, helpful, and specific. That is what converts when trust is established. So here you are after listening to the 6 reasons people's CTAs fail. You've heard my warnings, my advice, and you're thinking, okay, but like, what about my CTAs? Are they okay? Am I doing this right? So here's a quick self-audit question to ask as you're matching one of your 3 CTAs to each of your episodes. Is this CTA the natural next step for someone who found this episode useful? If the answer is no, okay, make a few changes. Not eventually, not after the next batch, not when you redesign the whole funnel. That is not necessary. Just fix that one CTA. Sometimes the show actually doesn't need a full strategy overhaul. Sometimes the episode is good, the audience is right, the trust is building. The next step is just a little shaky bridge, okay? But that's not bad news because you just received an entire set of instructions on how to fix that CTA. You can clarify what you're asking them to do. You can match it to the episode type. You can make the outcome more obvious or more compelling. And you can say your call to action earlier in the episode. The point of this and like the true work behind this is reducing friction. In closing, if your call to action is not converting, do not assume your audience doesn't care or isn't engaged. I want you to assume that they don't understand why this next step matters, why it matters now, or how it even connects to the problem that they just heard you unpack in your episode. Your job is to make that connection for them. A strong call to action does not pressure the listener, it guides them. It says, you're here, here's the problem, and here's the next helpful thing that you need. That is how your podcast becomes more than education and instead becomes a relationship on ramp that they can choose when they're ready. Thanks so much for listening to Podcasting for Financial Professionals. If you want your show to do more than just educate, if you want it to generate leads and bring in clients consistently for the long haul, make sure you're using the Podcast Conversion Blueprint. This free download helps you structure your podcast to attract new listeners, refine your messaging to nurture them, and capture those listeners when they're ready as your next best clients. And of course, practicing what I preach when you sign up for your free download of the Podcast Conversion Blueprint, you're going to land on my email list. Hit reply to any newsletter because I'd love to learn about your show or about your ideas for a show. I'll point you toward your next best step, whether that be light support like an audit of your show or becoming a member of the Academy, or maybe you need full service strategy and accountability like what I do inside the Podcast Conversion Lab. Thanks again for listening to Podcasting for Financial Professionals. If you enjoyed today's episode, stick around for the next few episodes because each one incrementally helps you improve your podcast.